Today's story takes us inside one of America's most bizarre and haunted mansions, the Winchester Mystery House. Built by Sarah Winchester, the widow of the famous rifle manufacturer, this sprawling mansion was designed with strange, twisting hallways, doors that open into walls, and staircases leading to nowhere. Sarah believed she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and that constant construction would keep them at bay. But did she succeed, or is her mansion still cursed? If you're drawn to true crime, haunting, and mystery stories, you're in the right place. Subscribe for more chilling stories, and let us know in the comments which mystery you'd like us to explore next. Sarah Lockwood Winchester's life began in a way that gave no hints of the future she would eventually lead. Born in 1839 to a well-to-do family in New Haven, Connecticut, she was brought up in a world of privilege and opportunity. Her family was part of the upper class of New England, and she was afforded the best education available to women at the time. Sarah was said to be highly intelligent, fluent in several languages, and possessing a natural charm that made her a darling of high society. It seemed that she was destined for a prosperous and happy life. In 1862, at the age of 23, Sarah married William Wirt Winchester, the son of Oliver Winchester, the founder of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. At that time, the Winchester rifle was becoming one of the most successful firearms in the world, known for its efficiency and effectiveness. The company's success meant that Sarah and William were part of one of the wealthiest families in America. The couple seemed to have everything one could hope for: wealth, status, and a promising future. But tragedy would soon change the course of Sarah's life forever. Just 4 years into their marriage, in 1866, the couple was struck by a devastating loss. Their only child, Annie Pardee Winchester, was born but died only 6 weeks later from a rare childhood illness known as marasmus. This blow shattered Sarah. The joy of becoming a mother was cruelly taken from her, leaving a wound that would never fully heal. She withdrew from the public eye, sinking into deep sorrow. The pain didn't stop there. Over a decade later, in 1881, Sarah's husband William succumbed to tuberculosis, a disease that had claimed many lives during that time. Now, Sarah was not only grieving the loss of her child, but also the death of her beloved husband. These compounded losses left her in a state of despair, as she found herself alone in the world, burdened by unimaginable grief. Following William's death, Sarah inherited a fortune over $20 million, the equivalent of hundreds of millions in today's dollars, and 50% ownership of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, which provided her with an enormous daily income. But despite her vast wealth, Sarah could not escape the shadows of the past. This is where the story of the Winchester Mystery House begins to take a darker turn. Stricken with guilt and believing she was haunted by the spirits of those who had died from the very invention that made her family so rich, Sarah sought answers beyond the material world. Legend has it that she visited a medium in Boston who delivered a chilling message. The spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles were seeking revenge. According to the medium, these spirits were the cause of Sarah's misfortune, and they would continue to torment her unless she did something to appease them. The medium allegedly told Sarah that she needed to move west and build a house to appease these restless spirits. The catch was that construction on this house could never stop. If the building ever ceased, the spirits would come for her. Whether or not this story is entirely true remains a mystery, but what is known is that soon after the meeting with the medium, Sarah moved to California and purchased a small, unfinished farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley. This house would eventually become the Winchester Mystery House. In 1886, Sarah began the construction that would never end. She hired teams of carpenters, stonemasons, and laborers to work around the clock, expanding the house into a sprawling, labyrinthine mansion. The construction followed no master plan, and the house grew in a seemingly haphazard fashion, with rooms added on top of rooms. staircases leading to nowhere, and doors opening to brick walls. What Sarah Winchester's true intentions were will likely never be fully understood. Some believe she was driven by her guilt, building room after room to confuse and contain the spirits that haunted her. Others speculate that she was simply a woman dealing with unbearable loss and grief, and that the constant construction was a way for her to stay busy, to keep her mind occupied. Still others think Sarah was simply eccentric, and that the bizarre design of the house reflected her unique personality and imagination. Despite the rumors and speculation, Sarah Winchester remained a private figure throughout her life. She never gave interviews, and she rarely spoke about her personal beliefs or the reasons behind the constant construction. To her neighbors, she was an enigma, a wealthy widow who lived in seclusion in her ever-growing mansion, with only her staff and occasional visitors for company. The image of Sarah as a reclusive, grieving widow added to the growing legend surrounding her. Locals whispered about the strange goings-on at the mansion, and stories of hauntings began to circulate. People speculated that Sarah was trying to communicate with the dead, using the house as a kind of spiritual sanctuary. Others said she was building the house as a way to atone for her family's role in the deaths of so many. Whatever her reasons, one thing is clear. Sarah Winchester's life was shaped by loss, and her grief manifested in a way that would leave a lasting impact. The house she built stands as a testament to her pain, her fears, and perhaps her hope that in some way she could make peace with the spirits of the past. As the years rolled by, the Winchester Mansion, now known as the Winchester Mystery House, became a sprawling, bewildering maze of rooms, hallways, and staircases. With each passing day of construction, the house grew more perplexing and even more detached from any logical architectural structure. For those who visited or worked on the mansion, it was clear that this was no ordinary home. The unusual design choices reflected something deeper, something connected to the hidden fears and secrets that Sarah Winchester carried within her. To the casual observer, the house seemed like a bizarre creation, a place where the laws of design and reason simply did not apply. It was easy to get lost within its walls, as the layout made little sense. Long hallways stretched out in random directions, sometimes leading to a dead end or a closet. A staircase might rise for several steps, only to stop abruptly at a ceiling. Doors opened to brick walls, while some even opened to a sheer drop outside the house, with no balcony or landing. It was a place full of strange and unnerving surprises at every turn. But what was the reason for these odd architectural choices? The answer, if there was one, seemed to lie in Sarah Winchester's complex and mysterious relationship with the spirits she believed were haunting her. Some stories claimed that Sarah had designed the house as a way to confuse these spirits, hoping that the labyrinthine design would keep them from finding her. Others suggested that the house was never meant to be understood by the living at all, but instead built as a kind of spiritual puzzle for the dead. What became clear over time was that the house itself seemed to reflect Sarah's growing obsession with the supernatural. In the later years of her life, it was said that she often consulted mediums or even communicated directly with spirits to guide her in the construction process. She allegedly held nightly seances in a special room of the house, known as the Blue Room or the Seance Room, where she would attempt to commune with the spirits and receive their instructions on how to proceed with the building. The room was hidden away in the maze of the mansion, accessible only through secret passages, reinforcing the idea that Sarah was operating in a world that was not fully visible to others. The Blue Room itself was shrouded in mystery. Some accounts described it as a small, dimly lit chamber, with a single chair, a writing table, and a bell that Sarah would ring to summon the spirits. The windows were said to be covered with heavy curtains, and the room was always kept locked when not in use. Whether or not these seances were real or simply exaggerated by local legend, it is undeniable that Sarah's belief in the supernatural played a crucial role in shaping the house. She may have seen the spirits not just as vengeful beings, but as her advisors, helping her navigate her strange and solitary life. In addition to the house's baffling architecture, there were other oddities that hinted at Sarah's deeper beliefs. The number 13 appeared repeatedly throughout the mansion. Windows had 13 panes, staircases often had 13 steps, and even the bathrooms featured 13 tiles. Sarah's fascination with this number remains one of the more enduring mysteries of the house. Was it a superstition, a lucky number, or something more significant? Some believe that the number 13 was meant to ward off evil spirits or bring her protection, but Sarah never explained its meaning to anyone, leaving it up to speculation. There were also symbols embedded in the house's architecture that hinted at Sarah's interest in mysticism and the occult. Some believe she was influenced by esoteric teachings or ancient wisdom, possibly incorporating elements of numerology or spiritual symbolism into the house's design. The house itself became a kind of living talisman, full of hidden meanings that only Sarah truly understood. Aside from these symbolic elements, the house also featured cutting-edge technology for its time. Despite the bizarre layout, Sarah spared no expense when it came to modern amenities. The mansion was equipped with indoor plumbing, including hot water, which was a rare luxury in the late 19th century. It also had push-button gas lighting, an advanced intercom system, and even a unique heating system. These modern features stood in stark contrast to the house's chaotic design, creating a strange blend of the old and new. But as impressive as these features were, they only added to the house's mystique. For those who ventured inside, it felt less like a home and more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The house was full of secret passageways and hidden doors, many of which led nowhere. Some believed these were designed to help Sarah move through the house unseen or to allow her to escape the spirits that might be following her. Others thought they were simply the product of her eccentric mind, her grief and guilt manifesting in the creation of this strange and haunting structure. The longer the house stood, the more stories began to emerge about its haunted nature. Visitors and workers alike claimed to have experienced strange occurrences within its walls. Some reported hearing footsteps when no one else was around. Others claimed to have seen shadowy figures moving through the hallways or disappearing into walls. The sound of hammering, even after construction had ceased following Sarah's death, was said to echo through the mansion. These ghostly rumors only fueled the legend surrounding the house, making it a destination for those curious about the supernatural. Sarah's isolation and secretive nature only added to the intrigue. She rarely spoke to outsiders, preferring to live alone in her vast mansion, surrounded by the constant noise of construction. Over time, she became known as the Mystery Lady, a widow who had retreated from society into her world of endless building and spiritual consultations. Some saw her as a tragic figure, a woman broken by grief and guilt, while others thought she might have been mentally unwell, driven by irrational fears and superstitions. The house itself became a reflection of Sarah's inner turmoil. The chaotic, nonsensical design was a physical manifestation of the confusion and sorrow that plagued her. For nearly 4 decades, she lived within its walls, overseeing the construction of a mansion that seemed destined never to be finished. And yet, for all its strangeness, the house was her sanctuary, the place where she could try, in her own way, to make peace with the ghosts of her past. The Winchester Mystery House grew into a living legend, a symbol of one woman's battle with forces both seen and unseen. The mysteries that surrounded its construction have never fully been explained, and the house itself continues to captivate and confuse those who visit it. To this day, the questions remain. Was Sarah Winchester truly haunted by the spirits of those who had fallen to the rifles that bore her name? Or was she simply haunted by her own grief, her own fears, building an endless house to distract herself from the loss that had consumed her? In either case, The house stands as a testament to a life marked by tragedy and a mind that sought to cope with it in the only way she knew how, by building endlessly until the day she could build no more. As the Winchester Mystery House continued its relentless expansion, Sarah Winchester's life grew increasingly isolated. Although she was one of the wealthiest women in America, she withdrew further and further from society, shutting herself away in her ever-growing mansion. She rarely ventured outside, and the few people who did encounter her described her as a somber, almost ghostly figure who seemed consumed by her private thoughts. This seclusion, combined with the mystery surrounding the house, only deepened the fascination with her and the stories of spirits that surrounded her life. By this time, Sarah had become known as a reclusive widow, a woman who lived in near total isolation, spending her days directing the construction of a house that seemed to have no end. Though she continued to employ a large staff of workers, carpenters, and servants, few knew her personally. She avoided social gatherings and seldom interacted with the community outside of her home. Even among her employees, Sarah was distant, communicating mostly through her foreman or leaving instructions for the workers without speaking to them directly. Those who worked on the house or visited for business purposes reported that Sarah was a kind, though deeply private, employer. She paid her workers generously, ensuring their loyalty and dedication, but they knew little of her beyond the fact that she insisted on the continual building of the mansion. This ongoing construction, regardless of the time of day or the scope of the additions, was a constant in Sarah's life. It was as if stopping, even for a moment, would open the door to the spiritual forces she feared. The growing complexity of the house mirrored the deepening complexity of Sarah's emotional and mental state. The more the mansion expanded, the more labyrinthine it became, and it was clear that the purpose of the construction was no longer practical, if it ever had been. The rooms, hallways, and staircases seemed to follow no logical pattern, as if they were not meant to serve any real human needs. Instead, they appeared to be designed for something or someone else. This endless, obsessive construction became a central part of Sarah's existence, an all-consuming project that kept her mind occupied as she navigated her grief and fear. But Sarah's isolation was not only physical, it was also emotional and psychological. The loss of her daughter Annie, followed by the death of her husband William, had left Sarah profoundly affected. Her wealth, though vast, could not shield her from the pain of those losses. Her retreat from society seemed to be both a way to protect herself from the outside world and a way to escape the guilt she felt about the fortune she had inherited, much of it earned from the Winchester rifles that had claimed so many lives. It's easy to see how Sarah's internal world mirrored the mansion she was building around her. Just as the house became a maze of dead ends, hidden passageways, and unexplained rooms, Sarah's own thoughts seemed to follow similarly confusing and tangled paths. The constant building was, in many ways, a reflection of her own attempts to construct a barrier between herself and the traumas of her past. But beyond the mansion's physical growth, there was another dimension to Sarah's isolation, her relationship with the supernatural. By now, it was widely believed that Sarah's fear of the spirits of those killed by the Winchester rifle drove much of her behavior. Whether these spirits were real or imagined, they had become a defining force in her life. The stories of Sarah holding nightly seances in the Blue Room became widely accepted as fact, even if no one outside her immediate circle ever witnessed them. It was said that Sarah used these seances to communicate with the spirits, seeking guidance on how to build the house in a way that would appease them. While these stories are shrouded in mystery and legend, there's no doubt that Sarah's belief in the spirits was genuine. She seemed to feel a responsibility for the deaths caused by the weapons that had made her family so wealthy, and in her mind, she needed to atone for this. The house, in its bizarre and sprawling design, was her way of making peace with these restless souls, or at least of keeping them at bay. Despite her isolation, Sarah was not entirely alone. She maintained a small, loyal staff who worked and lived in the house with her. Most notably, her niece, Marion Marriott, moved in with her and became one of the few people who had regular access to Sarah's private world. Marion's presence was a comfort to Sarah, offering her some form of human connection in her otherwise solitary existence. Still, even with Marion by her side, Sarah remained deeply withdrawn. A woman whose life had been shaped by loss, guilt, and a relentless fear of the unknown. Those who visited the house during this time often left with strange and unsettling stories. Some spoke of eerie feelings while inside, as if they were being watched. Others claimed to have heard footsteps or voices when no one else was around. The stories of the mansion being haunted began to spread far and wide, adding to the growing legend of both the house and its mysterious owner. The more isolated Sarah became, the more the stories about her grew, turning her into a figure of fascination and fear in the local community. But for Sarah, the isolation wasn't just about escaping from the world. It was about survival. The house, with its endless construction and confusing design, was her fortress against the spirits she believed were after her. She feared that if the building stopped, if the hammers and saws went silent, the spirits would finally catch up to her. In her mind, the ongoing construction was the only thing keeping her safe, the only thing holding back the supernatural forces that had plagued her since the deaths of her husband and child. As the years went on, Sarah's health began to decline. She became more frail and less able to oversee the construction of the house directly. Yet, even as her physical strength waned, her obsession with the mansion continued. Workers still received orders from her, and the building process never ceased. Though she rarely left her bedroom in the later years of her life, Sarah remained deeply involved in every decision related to the house's design and expansion. Her seclusion, combined with her increasing frailty, only added to the sense of mystery surrounding her. To the outside world, Sarah Winchester was a woman trapped by her own grief and fears, locked away in a mansion that grew more bizarre with each passing year. The people of San Jose whispered about the mad widow who lived in her endless house, driven by ghosts and guilt to build and build, as if the construction itself could save her from the darkness that had consumed her life. Yet, to those few who knew her, Sarah was not mad. She was a woman who had experienced unimaginable loss and who had chosen to cope with it in the only way. She knew how, by retreating into herself and into the strange, ever-changing mansion that she built around her. For Sarah, the Winchester Mystery House was more than just a home. It was a reflection of her soul, a place where she could try to find peace in a world that had offered her so much pain. But peace, it seemed, would always elude her. And as Sarah's life neared its end, the house stood as a testament to her isolation and the mysteries that had shaped her existence. What would happen to the mansion and the woman who had built it would soon become the final chapter in this story of loss, fear, and an unfinished legacy. In the early morning hours of September 5th, 1922, Sarah Winchester passed away in her sleep at the age of 83. Her death marked the end of nearly 4 decades of continual construction on the Winchester Mystery House. The woman who had isolated herself from the world, driven by grief, guilt, and a fear of the unknown, was gone. But the mansion she had built, the sprawling, labyrinthine structure that defied explanation, remained, standing as both a symbol of her life and a monument to the mysteries she carried with her to the grave. Sarah's passing sent ripples through the community. The locals, who had long whispered stories about the crazy widow and her haunted house, were now free to speculate on what would become of the massive estate. When the news broke that construction had finally stopped, many believed that the spirits who had driven Sarah to build incessantly had finally been appeased. With her death, they assumed, the haunting would end and the mansion would fall silent. But Sarah's legacy was far from over. In the days following her death, rumors and stories about the house continued to spread. What would become of the Winchester Mystery House was a question on everyone's mind. The mansion was not only an architectural marvel, but also a place shrouded in myth and legend. And now, without Sarah's guiding hand, the house itself seemed to take on a life of its own, as if it were still caught between the world of the living and the world of the spirits that had haunted her. The contents of Sarah's will revealed just how secretive she had been about her estate. Despite her vast fortune, she left no clear instructions regarding the future of the house. In fact, she left it out of her will entirely. Instead, her personal belongings and much of her wealth were bequeathed to her niece, Marion Marriott, and a few loyal employees. But the mansion, with its 160 rooms, twisting hallways, and hidden passageways, was left behind, its future uncertain. After Sarah's death, the mansion was thoroughly inspected for the first time by those outside her inner circle. What they found inside only deepened the mysteries surrounding the house. The sprawling structure contained a bewildering assortment of rooms, some of which had likely never been used. Rooms that were locked and hidden were opened for the first time in decades, revealing untouched furniture and decor from a bygone era. Visitors described it as walking through a time capsule, a snapshot of a life that had been suspended in perpetual construction. The sheer scale of the house was astonishing. Workers who had been inside for years had only seen small portions of it. But now, for the first time, the full extent of Sarah's creation was revealed. The mansion included 47 fireplaces, 10,000 window panes, 17 chimneys, 2,000 doors, and miles of hallways. But more than the numbers, it was the sheer strangeness of the design that captured people's attention. Trapdoors, false staircases, and rooms within rooms created an experience that was unlike anything else. The house seemed designed to confuse and disorient anyone who stepped inside. One of the most puzzling discoveries was the existence of entire wings of the house that had been sealed off. These areas, forgotten and left unfinished, added to the eerie atmosphere. It was as if Sarah had simply abandoned certain projects in mid-construction, locking the doors and moving on to other sections of the mansion. These sealed-off areas fueled speculation about Sarah's mental state in her later years. Had she grown too frail to oversee the construction? Or had the spirits, for some unknown reason, instructed her to leave these areas unfinished? The public's fascination with the house only grew after Sarah's death. Entrepreneurs saw an opportunity, and soon after, the mansion was opened to the public as a tourist attraction. It was quickly dubbed the Winchester Mystery House, and people flocked to see the bizarre structure for themselves. The stories of Sarah's nightly seances, her fear of the spirits, and her obsessive need to continue building made for a compelling narrative that drew in curious visitors. But for all the ghost stories and legends that surrounded the house, it was also a marvel of construction. Architects and engineers were both baffled and impressed by the mansion's design. Though much of it defied traditional logic, the craftsmanship and attention to detail were undeniable. The house was both a maze and a masterpiece, a physical manifestation of one woman's eccentricities and fears. Over the years, the stories about the house have evolved, and it has become a destination for paranormal enthusiasts who believe that Sarah's spirits still linger in the mansion. Countless visitors and paranormal investigators claim to have experienced strange occurrences while inside unexplained cold spots. The feeling of being watched, and even sightings of shadowy figures moving through the halls. The legend of the haunted Winchester Mystery House has grown, turning it into one of the most famous haunted houses in America. Yet, for all the stories of hauntings and restless spirits, the house also stands as a testament to Sarah's life and the struggles she endured. Her grief, her guilt, and her fear of the unknown were woven into the very fabric of the mansion, and it is impossible to separate the structure from the woman who built it. The house, in all its confusion and chaos, was Sarah's way of coping with the tragedies that had marked her life. It was both her prison and her refuge, a place where she could hide from the world and from the spirits she believed were haunting her. Today, the Winchester Mystery House remains an enduring symbol of one woman's attempt to make sense of her own suffering. It is a place of intrigue and mystery, where visitors come to marvel at its strange architecture and to ponder the life of the woman who created it. The mansion, with its endless rooms and hidden passageways, continues to draw people in, much as it did during Sarah's lifetime. But even now, nearly a century after her death, the true meaning of the house and the full extent of Sarah's motivations remains elusive. For Sarah Winchester, the house was never just a building. It was a way to keep the spirits at bay, a way to make peace with the past, and perhaps a way to atone for the bloodshed caused by the rifles that bore her name. But in the end, the house became more than just a home. It became a symbol of loss, fear, and the lengths to which one woman was willing to go in order to protect herself from forces both real and imagined. As visitors walk through the twisting hallways and climb the staircases that lead nowhere, they are not just exploring a mansion. They are stepping into the mind of Sarah Winchester, a woman who spent her life haunted by both the living and the dead. And in doing so, they become part of a legacy that continues to captivate, confuse, and mystify all who encounter it. The Winchester Mystery House, with its endless secrets and unanswered questions, will likely never reveal all of its mysteries, but perhaps that is the point. For Sarah Winchester, the house was not meant to be understood by the living. It was a place for the spirits, and for herself to find some semblance of peace in a world that had been marked by tragedy. And in its strange, unfinished state, the house continues to serve as a reminder of the mysteries that lie within us all. Thank you for joining us on this spine-chilling journey through the Winchester Mystery House, a place where every hallway and hidden door tells a story, leaving us to wonder if the spirits Sarah Winchester feared are still wandering those endless corridors. If you enjoyed this dive into true crime, haunting, and mystery stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. We bring you stories like this twice a week, keeping you on the edge of your seat with every tale. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember sometimes, history's mysteries are better left unsolved.